Hey guys, tonight we're going to the palace. But before you imagine waltzing through the hall of mirrors in a silk gown, smelling of lavender and expensive perfume, I have to stop you. The real royal court wasn't a fairy tale. It was a crowded, freezing and incredibly smelly machine designed to crush your spirit while you smiled and thanked the king for the privilege. It was a world where hygiene was a rumour, privacy was a sin, and the most dangerous thing in the room wasn't an assassin but the water in your glass. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you have just arrived at Versailles, or maybe Hampton Court. The year is roughly 1680, give or take a decade. You're a courtier. You have land, you have a title, and you have enough money to buy a small fleet of ships. You should feel powerful, you should feel on top of the world, but instead you feel nauseous. The first thing that hits you isn't the grandeur of the gold gates or the perfectly manicured gardens. It is the smell. You have to understand the scale of a royal palace. This isn't a house. It is a city squeezed into a single building. At Versailles, under Louis XIV, there are anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 people living inside the complex at any given time. Nobles, servants, guards, cooks, cleaners, and hangers-on. And there is no plumbing. There are no flushing toilets. There are no sewage pipes. There are commodes, fancy wooden boxes with ceramic bowls inside, but there aren't enough of them. And when you have 10,000 people and only a few hundred bowls, math becomes your enemy. So what happens? People improvise. You walk down the grand hallway, the Galerie des Glaces. It is stunning. Mirrors reflect the candlelight. Crystal chandeliers sparkle overhead. But if you look down, into the corners, behind the heavy velvet curtains, you see the puddles. Courtiers, men in silk stockings and women in layers of brocade, relieve themselves wherever they can find a shadow. Behind a statue of Venus, in the fireplace, in the stairwell. The palace floors are literally soaked in urine. The servants try to clean it up, but they are fighting a losing battle against biology. The smell is a mixture of unwashed bodies, stale waste, wood smoke, and the desperate, overpowering scent of musk and ambergris perfume used to cover it all up. It creates a heavy, cloying atmosphere that sticks to the back of your throat. Visitors from the countryside often fainted not from the beauty of the king, but from the lack of oxygen. But the smell is just the introduction. Now you have to deal with the accommodation. You think, because you're a noble, you will have a suite of rooms, a bedroom, a solar, maybe a nice view of the fountain. Reality check. Unless you are the king, the queen, or a very high-ranking duke, you are living in a closet. The king wants everyone at court where he can see them. He wants you dependent on him. So, he invites everyone to live in the palace. But the palace isn't infinite. You are assigned a room in the attic. It is tiny. It has no fireplace, which means in the winter, the water in your wash basin freezes solid. You might be sharing this room with 2 or 3 other nobles, or, if you are lucky, just your own servants. The walls are thin. You can hear your neighbour snoring. You can hear the couple next door arguing about debt. You can hear the rats scuttling in the eaves. You have dragged your furniture all the way from your country estate because the king doesn't provide it. You have your bed, a chest for your clothes, and maybe a folding chair. You're living like a refugee, but you're wearing diamonds, and it is dark. The great halls are lit with thousands of beeswax candles. It is blindingly bright, hot, and glorious. But the corridors, the stairwells, they are pitch black. Oil and wax are expensive. The king doesn't waste them on the back hallways. So navigating the palace at night is a dangerous game. You carry a small lantern, but the shadows are deep. You trip over sleeping servants who have curled up on the floor because they have nowhere else to go. You step in things you hope are just mud. This is the Gilded Cage. It looks magnificent from the outside. The gold leaf peels in the sunlight. The fountains dance. But inside, it is a tenement slum filled with the richest people in Europe. But why are you here? Why endure the smell, the cold, and the crowding? Because of the sun, the king. In this world, the king is not just a political leader. He is the centre of the universe. He is the source of all patronage, all money, all power. If the king smiles at you, your debts are paid, your daughters marry dukes, and you get a pension. If the king ignores you, you're nothing. You're a ghost in expensive clothes. So your entire life, every waking minute is dedicated to one thing: being seen. You wake up at 5:00 a.m. Not because you want to, but because you have to be ready for the lever, the rising ceremony. You dress. We will talk about the nightmare of fashion later, but for now, just know that it takes hours. You put on the wig, you powder your face, you douse yourself in scent to hide the fact that you haven't bathed in 3 months. You rush to the king's bedroom. You join a crowd of hundreds of other nobles, all jostling for position outside the door. You're all waiting for a man to wake up. The doors open, the first entry. Only the princes of the blood and the most important officials are allowed in. You watch them go, seething with jealousy. They get to see the king in his nightshirt. They get to see him shave. It is the highest honour in the land. Then the second entry, the dukes, the peers. Finally the grand entry. The doors are thrown wide, the rest of you pour in. The room is crowded, it is hot. The king is standing there, being dressed by his servants. He doesn't look at you. He extends an arm and a duke slides his sleeve on. He extends a leg and a prince puts on his stocking. You stand on your tiptoes trying to catch his eye. You want him to nod, just a nod. That's all you need. "Sire," someone whispers, "the Duke of Norfolk is here." The king grunts. That's it. That is your work day. You stood in a crowd for 2 hours to watch a man put on his pants, and you will do it again tomorrow, and the day after that. This is the psychological torture of the court. It is a waiting game. You are constantly on display, constantly performing, constantly terrified that you have committed a faux pas. Did you bow low enough? Did you wear the right colour? Did you laugh at the king's joke but not too loudly? One mistake and you are sent to the country. This sounds like a vacation. In reality, it is social death. Being sent away from court means you are irrelevant. The flow of money stops. The invitations stop. You sit in your drafty castle in the middle of nowhere, reading old letters, knowing that the world has forgotten you. So you stay. You endure the attic room. You endure the smell of the unwashed bodies. You endure the boredom. And speaking of boredom, let's talk about what you actually do all day. Movies show court life as a series of exciting intrigues, affairs, and duels. Reality is mostly standing. You stand in the hallway waiting for the king to pass. You stand in the chapel during mass. You stand in the audience chamber. There are no chairs. Chairs are for the king and the queen. Everyone else stands. Even the duchesses. Even the old men with gout. You stand until your feet swell. You stand until your back spasms. If you faint, and people faint all the time because they are wearing corsets and heavy wool in a crowded room, you are dragged out by the Swiss guard. You don't make a scene, and while you stand, you gamble. Gambling is the engine of the court. It is the only thing to do. Card games, dice, basset, lansquenet. You play for enormous sums, thousands of livres or pounds, money you don't have. The king encourages this. Why? Because if you are busy gambling, you aren't plotting a rebellion. If you are deep in debt to the crown, you can't raise an army against him. It is a trap. The king builds a golden cage, fills it with cards and wine, and watches as the aristocracy bankrupts itself trying to keep up. You look around the room. You see faces that are painted white with lead makeup. You see smiles that hide rotting teeth. You see eyes that are frantic with anxiety. Everyone here is desperate. Everyone here is competing for the same limited resource, the king's attention. But amidst the desperation, there is hunger. It is time for dinner. You might think that being a noble means you eat well. You picture feasts of swan and venison, flowing wine and mounds of fruit. You're about to be disappointed. Because dining at court isn't about nutrition. It is about theatre. And unfortunately for your stomach, theatre tastes terrible. We're going to walk down to the dining hall, but be careful. The stairs are slippery, the hallway is dark, and the kitchen is a mile away. By the time the food reaches you, it will be something you never expected. Cold. We are going to talk about the royal table, the poison testers, the fork etiquette, and why you might starve to death while staring at a pile of roasted meat. Because in the palace, eating is the most dangerous part of the day. You're standing in the grand hall. Your stomach is growling so loudly you're afraid it might disturb the duke standing next to you. It has been hours since your meagre breakfast of ale and bread, and the smell of roasting meat is drifting through the air. But don't get your hopes up. You aren't about to eat. You're about to watch someone else eat. This is the Grand Couvert, the public dining ritual of the king. In the modern world, eating is a private, relaxing act. In the royal court, it is a spectator sport. The king sits alone at a table raised on a dais. He is facing the room, and you, along with hundreds of other nobles, are standing in a semicircle watching him chew. You are witnessing the logistical nightmare of feeding a monarch. Let's trace the journey of that piece of meat the king is currently ignoring. It started in the kitchens. But where are the kitchens? Not next to the dining hall, that would make sense. That would be efficient. No, the kitchens are in a completely different building, sometimes a quarter-mile away. This is to prevent the smell of cooking from offending the royal nose and to stop the palace from burning down if the spit roast goes wrong. So, the food has to travel. Imagine a procession, a cortege of meat. It leaves the kitchen piping hot. It is placed on silver platters and covered with heavy metal domes called cloches. But it can't just be walked to the table, it has to be escorted. A chaotic parade of guards, ushers, and the gentleman of the mouth marches the food through the damp, draughty corridors of the palace. They have to stop at checkpoints. They have to bow to specific statues. They have to wait for doors to be unlocked by specific key holders who are probably late. In the winter, the corridors are freezing. By the time the roast pheasant reaches the king's table, it has been on a 20-minute hike through a refrigerator. The gravy has congealed. The fat has turned into white, waxy lumps. The soup has a skin on it. The king doesn't care, he is used to it. He eats it cold. In fact, eating cold, greasy food is practically a royal tradition. It explains why so many monarchs suffered from chronic indigestion and terrible gas. You stand there, watching him, slice into the cold bird, and for a second, you don't envy him. But before he takes a bite, there is another ritual. The assay. The test. The king lives in constant low-level terror of poison. It is the silent assassin. You can't fight it with a sword, so you fight it with bureaucracy. Every single dish has to be tasted, but not by the king, by the servants. The chief butler takes a small piece of bread. He dips it into the soup. He eats it. He waits. Everyone watches him. Does he choke? Does he turn green? No. Then the cupbearer pours a little wine into a special testing cup. He drinks it. He waits. It takes forever. The food gets colder, and then the magical thinking comes in. On the table, right next to the salt cellar, sits a strange object. It looks like a spiraled piece of ivory, the unicorn horn. Spoiler, it is actually the tusk of a narwhal, sold to the king by Vikings for the price of a castle. They believe that the unicorn horn has magical properties. If it touches poison, it will sweat or change colour or neutralise the toxin. So, the servant takes the horn on a gold chain and dips it into the king's wine. He touches it to the meat. It is absurd. It is superstition masquerading as security, but everyone in the room takes it deadly seriously. If the horn doesn't react, the king eats. You watch this performance. You are starving. The smell of the food, even cold food, is driving you mad. But you cannot eat. There is no buffet for the courtiers. You are there to provide an audience. You are the laugh track for the king's dinner. If you're a high-ranking lady, you might be allowed to sit on a tabouret, a small, backless stool. It is uncomfortable. But in the hierarchy of the court, being allowed to rest your legs is a privilege people kill for. The king finishes. He wipes his hands on a wet napkin. He stands up. The show is over. Now, the scramble begins. The leftovers are cleared away. And where do they go? They don't go to the poor. They go down the chain of command. The highest-ranking servants get the first pick of the cold pheasant. Then the lower servants get the bones. By the time the food reaches the bottom of the hierarchy, it is picked clean. So, what do you eat? You retreat to your tiny, freezing attic room. You have your own servants, if you can afford them, bring you something from the common kitchen. This is not the king's kitchen. This is a mass catering operation that feeds the thousands of hangers-on. You sit on your bed. Your servant hands you a bowl. It contains a grey, unidentifiable stew. It is lukewarm. It tastes of salt and disappointment. You eat it with a spoon you brought yourself. Because forks are suspicious. In 1680, the fork is still a novelty in many parts of Europe. It is considered effeminate. Italian. Why use a metal prong when God gave you fingers? The king eats with his hands. He grabs a piece of meat, dips it in sauce and shoves it in his mouth. The sauce drips onto his cravat. He wipes his fingers on the tablecloth. It is messy. It is primal. If the king uses his fingers, you use your fingers. You tear the bread. You scoop the beans. Your hands are covered in grease. And how do you clean them? You wipe them on your napkin if you have one, or on your coat, or on the dog that is currently sniffing your leg. Hygiene at the table is non-existent. People blow their noses into their hands and then reach into the communal dish. They pick their teeth with knives, they spit on the floor. This is the height of civilization. This is the room where the fate of nations is decided, and it smells like wet woolen gravy. You finish your meal, you feel heavy. The food was rich, fatty, and salty. You're thirsty. You reach for the water jug. Stop. Do not drink the water. The water in the palace comes from the same river into which the city upstream dumps its sewage. It is brown. It moves on its own. If you drink it, you die. Or you wish you died, so you drink wine. But not the good stuff the king drank. You drink the second press. Thin, acidic, watery wine. You drink a lot of it. Everyone does. The entire court is functioning on a baseline level of mild intoxication. It helps numb the boredom. It helps blur the smell. But alcohol is a diuretic. And now you have a problem. You're in your room. It is night. You need to relieve yourself. You look for the chamber pot. It is under the bed. It is already half full because your servant forgot to empty it. You use it. Now the room smells of stew and urine. You can't open the window because the night air is bad. It carries the miasma, the invisible cloud of disease. So you seal yourself in with the smell. You crawl into bed. The sheets are damp. The wool itches. But you can't sleep yet because you hear scratching. The walls are alive. Rats. Versailles. Hampton Court. The Louvre. They are all infested. The food waste, the garbage piles, the open sewers. It is a paradise for rodents. They run through the walls. They run across the floor. Sometimes they run across your face. You pull the blanket up. You try to ignore the skittering sound. But there is something even more irritating than the rats. The fleas. You feel a bite on your ankle, then another on your neck. You scratch. You can't help it. Everyone scratches. If you watch a movie about royalty, notice how still they stand. That is a lie. Real courtiers were constantly twitching, rubbing, and scratching. Silk and velvet are beautiful, but they are impossible to wash. They are breeding grounds for vermin. You're wearing a very expensive flea hotel. You lie there, itching, smelling the chamber pot, listening to the rats, and realizing that you have a 5 a.m. wake-up call to watch the king shave again, and you think, is this it? Is this the power I craved? Yes, this is it. But tomorrow is a special day. Tomorrow isn't just about standing around. Tomorrow is the ball. You have to look your best. You have to shine. And that means you have to deal with the most dangerous, toxic, and painful aspect of court life. Fashion. You think modern beauty standards are harsh. Try wearing a wig that weighs 5 pounds and is infested with lice. Try painting your face with lead until your skin turns grey. Try wearing a corset made of iron and whalebone that literally rearranges your internal organs. We are going to talk about the torture of looking beautiful, and why the most fashionable people in the room were often the ones who are slowly dying from their own clothes. The sun has risen, the bells are ringing, and you have a problem. You have to get dressed. In the modern world, getting dressed takes 10 minutes. You put on pants, a shirt, maybe check a mirror. In the royal court, getting dressed is a construction project. It requires a team of engineers, a significant amount of pain tolerance, and a willingness to cover your body in toxic chemicals. You sit down in your dressing chair. Your servants surround you like a pit crew. The first step is the hair, or rather, the lack of it. You take off your nightcap, you run a hand over your scalp. It is stubbly. You keep your head shaved. Why? Because hair is dirty. Hair attracts lice. And in a palace where hygiene is a theoretical concept, lice are the enemy. But you can't go out bald. That is for peasants. You need a wig, and not just any wig. A periwig. A towering mountain of curls that cascades down your back like a woolly waterfall. Your valet brings it out. It is massive. It weighs 5 pounds. It is made of human hair, the most expensive kind bought from peasant girls, or horsehair, cheaper but itchier, or goat hair, which smells when it gets wet. He lowers it onto your head. It is heavy. It traps the heat immediately. Your scalp starts to sweat. But the wig isn't done. It needs to be white, or at least dusty grey. The valet picks up a powder puff. He blasts the wig with flour or starch. A cloud of white dust fills the room. You cough. The dust settles on your shoulders, on your furniture, in your lungs. This powder has a scent, lavender or orris root, but underneath the wig smells. It has never been washed. It cannot be washed. If you wash it, the curls fall out. So it sits on a wooden block at night, collecting dust, mites, and yes, the very lice you shaved your head to avoid. They live in the wig now. You feel a tickle behind your ear. You reach for your scratching stick, a long rod made of ivory or silver with a little hand on the end. You slide it under the heavy hair and scratch furiously. This is a socially acceptable action. Everyone scratches. Even the king scratches. Now for the face. You look in the mirror. Your skin is pockmarked from the smallpox you survived as a child. Your complexion is uneven because you haven't eaten a vegetable in 3 months. You look yellow. You need to look white. White skin is the ultimate status symbol. It means you don't work outside. It means you are pure. Your servant opens a jar. Inside is a thick white paste. Venetian ceruse. It is the foundation of beauty. It goes on smooth. It covers everything. It gives you the look of a porcelain doll. But you know what it's made of. Vinegar and lead. White lead. A potent neurotoxin. Every time you smear this paste onto your face, your skin absorbs the poison. At first, it dries out your skin. It makes it grey and shriveled. So what do? You apply a thicker layer of lead to hide the damage caused by the lead. It is a vicious, deadly cycle. Over time, your hairline recedes, your teeth turn grey, your breath starts to smell metallic, you get headaches, your hands tremble, you're literally painting yourself to death. But the white isn't enough. You need contrast. You need red cheeks. Your servant applies vermilion, a brilliant red rouge. What is vermilion? It is mercury sulfide. So now you have lead on your cheeks and mercury on your lips. You are a walking hazmat zone. If you kissed someone, you would arguably be poisoning them. And then, the finishing touch. The mouche, the fly. This is a small patch of black silk or velvet. It is cut into a shape, a star, a moon, a heart. You glue it to your face. Why? To cover the sores. Maybe it's a pimple. Maybe it's a smallpox scar. Or maybe it's a syphilis sore. The great pox is rampant at court. Everyone has it. The king has it. The bishop has it. So you turn your disease into fashion. You stick a black star over the oozing sore on your chin and call it a beauty mark. If you place it near the eye, it means you are passionate. Near the lip, coquettish. On the nose, saucy. You're using your own skin lesions to send flirtatious signals. Now, the body. If you are a woman, this is where the torture truly begins. The corset, or the pair of bodies. It is made of stiffened linen, reinforced with whalebone, reeds, or even iron. You hold onto the bedpost, your maid pulls the laces. Hard. The air leaves your lungs, your ribs compress, your internal organs are slowly, gently being rearranged. Your stomach is pushed up, your liver is squashed. You can't take a deep breath. You're now a shallow breather. This is why women at court swoon all the time. It isn't because they are overwhelmed by emotion. It is because their brains are starving for oxygen. But you have the silhouette, the inverted cone, the rigid torso, then come the layers, a chemise, a petticoat, another petticoat, a hoop skirt, farthingale, made of wood and wire that extends 3 feet on either side. You are now as wide as a door. You cannot walk normally, you have to glide. You cannot sit in a chair with arms. You take up massive amounts of space. And finally, the heavy velvet gown, embroidered with gold thread. It weighs 20 pounds. You're wearing a tent. A hot, heavy, crushing tent. If you're a man, it isn't much better. You're wearing wool stockings that cut off your circulation at the knee. You're wearing breeches that are so tight you worry about splitting them if you bow too low. You're wearing a coat with padded shoulders and a high collar that forces your chin up. And the shoes. High heels. Yes, men wore high heels first. Louis XIV was short. He wanted to be tall. So he wore red-heeled shoes. Now everyone wears them. You are teetering on 3-inch heels trying to balance on a slippery floor while wearing a 5-pound wig. You're ready. You look in the mirror. You're a masterpiece of artifice. White face, red cheeks, towering hair, glittering clothes. But you smell. You haven't bathed in weeks. Dry washing is the trend. You rub your skin with a dry linen cloth to remove the sweat. You change your linen undershirt every day, if you are rich, because you believe the linen absorbs the dirt from your body. But the layers of wool and velvet, they are never washed. They trap the sweat. So you douse yourself in perfume. Musk. Civet, which comes from the anal gland of a civet cat. Ambergris, whale vomit. Heavy animalistic scents designed to punch through the odour of humanity. You are a cloud of musk, lead powder and unwashed hair. You step out of your room. You navigate the dark stairs. You head to the ballroom. Tonight is a masquerade. The king loves a masquerade. It allows people to hide their identities. It allows for secrets. But a masquerade in a palace is a pressure cooker. The room is packed. Hundreds of bodies, thousands of candles. The heat is intense. The wax from the chandeliers drips down onto the dancers. You feel a hot drop of wax hit your shoulder. You ignore it. The music starts. It is a minuet. This is not a fun dance. It is a geometry test. You have to move in perfect patterns. You have to point your toe. You have to bow at the exact right second. If you make a mistake, the whole court sees it. They will mock you tomorrow. Did you see the Duke turn left instead of right? How rustic. You are dancing. You are sweating under your wig. The lead makeup is starting to melt into your pores. Your corset is digging into your ribs. And then you feel it. A flea. It is crawling inside your stocking. It bites. You can't scratch. Not while dancing with the Duchess. You have to keep smiling. You have to keep pointing your toe. But the courtiers have a solution for this too. You look at the woman next to you. She is wearing a fur stole around her neck. It looks like a dead animal. It is a dead animal, a marten or a stoat, but the head of the animal is made of gold, and inside the fur there is honey. It is a flea cravat. The idea is that the fleas will be attracted to the fur and the honey, and they will jump off you and onto the dead animal. You are literally wearing a flea trap as jewellery. The dance ends. You bow. You are breathless. You need a drink, but remember the rule. Do not drink the water, you drink the punch. It is wine, sugar, spices, and maybe a little brandy. It is strong. You look across the room. You see the king. He is wearing a mask of the sun god, Apollo. He is dancing. He looks energetic. But you know the truth. You saw the doctors entering his chambers this morning. The king is in pain. We are going to talk about the royal body. Because for all the gold and the glamour, the king is a human being living in a time before antibiotics, before dentistry and before sanitary surgery. And right now, the most powerful man in Europe is fighting a battle against his own anatomy. We're going to talk about the royal fistula, the surgery that changed history, and why, for a brief period in France, it became fashionable to bandage your rear end in solidarity with the king. Because in the palace, if the king hurts, everyone hurts. You are standing in the king's antechamber. The air is thick with whispers. The musicians have stopped playing. The gambling tables are silent. The Sun King, Louis XIV, the man who built this golden cage, is missing. He hasn't been seen in public for days. Rumours are flying. Is he dead? Is it poison? Has he been kidnapped? No. It is something far more human and far more embarrassing. The king has an anal fistula. I know. It sounds like a joke. But in the 17th century, this is a matter of national security. The king's body is the state. If his body fails, the state fails. And right now, the state is in agony. The doctors are in a panic. They have tried everything. They have applied poultices of snakeskin and frog spawn. They have forced him to drink elixirs made of crushed pearls. Nothing worked. Now, they have to operate. But there is a problem. Surgery in the 1600s is considered a dirty trade. Physicians just talk, barber surgeons cut, and cutting the king is complicated. If the knife slips, the surgeon isn't just fired, he is executed for regicide. So, the royal surgeon, Charles-François Félix, prepares. But he doesn't practice on cadavers, he practices on the poor. For months, the hospitals of Paris have been sending volunteers with similar conditions to the surgeon's house. He operates on them. Many die. They are buried secretly at dawn so the public doesn't panic. Finally, the day comes. You aren't in the room, thank goodness. Only the king, his mistress, and the surgeon are there. There is no anaesthesia, no ether, no chloroform. The king lies on a table near the window for the light. He refuses to be bound. He says, "I will bear it like a king." The surgeon uses a custom-made knife, a royal bistoury, curved and sharp. He cuts. The king doesn't scream. He grips the table. He sweats. But he survives. And here is where court life gets truly insane. When the king returns to court, bandaged and walking with a limp, the courtiers don't look away. They don't give him privacy. They copy him. Suddenly it becomes fashionable to have a fistula, or at least to pretend you have one. You see dukes walking with a limp. You see countesses sitting gingerly on the edge of their chairs. People start wearing bandages around, their rear ends underneath their breeches. They call it the royal ailment. It is the ultimate sycophancy. If the king suffers, I suffer. Please notice my loyalty. You watch this spectacle and realise that these people have lost their minds. They are so desperate for favour that they are faking rectal surgery. But the medical horrors of the court don't stop there. Let's talk about the clister. This is the enema. And in the 17th century it is an obsession. Doctors believed that all illness came from internal blockage. The cure for everything, headaches, melancholy, bad breath, was to flush the system. The king loves them. Louis XIV reportedly had over 2,000 enemas during his reign. But he doesn't go to a private bathroom. He receives them in his chambers, sometimes while dictating letters or talking to ambassadors. Imagine you are a diplomat. You are trying to negotiate a treaty. The king is lying on a daybed. A doctor walks in with a giant metal syringe that looks like a trombone. The king signals you to pause. The procedure happens. Then, the king says, "Now, about that treaty." You have to keep a straight face. You have to pretend this is normal. Because if you laugh, you start a war. The smell in the room changes. Incense is burned to cover it. But you know. Everyone knows. And it's not just the king. The ladies of the court do it too. They take complexion washes, enemas meant to clear the skin. They do it before balls. They do it before portraits. It creates a culture where bodily functions are weirdly public. Privacy is suspicious. If you lock your door, people assume you are plotting treason, so you leave the door open, even for the doctor. But while the king is surviving his surgery, the queen has a different battle, the royal birth. If surgery is dangerous, childbirth is a death sentence. The queen is pregnant. This is good news. The kingdom needs an heir. But the delivery room is not a sanctuary. It is a circus. When the labour pains start, the queen's bedroom fills up. Not just with doctors and midwives, with witnesses, princes, princesses, bishops, mayors. Why? To ensure the baby isn't swapped. They need to see the child come out of the royal body. Imagine giving birth while 50 people stand around your bed, watching, judging, and whispering. The windows are sealed to keep out drafts and fresh air. The fire is roared up. The room is stiflingly hot. The smell of sweat, blood, and unwashed velvet is overpowering. The queen is lying on a birthing bed. She has no pain relief. The church frowns on it. If things go wrong, the doctors are helpless. They don't wash their hands. They move from patient to patient, carrying puerperal fever, childbed fever. If the queen dies, it is a tragedy, but the king will remarry. If the baby dies, it is a crisis. You stand in the back of the room, craning your neck. You hear the cry. "It's a boy!" The room erupts. Bells ring across the city. Cannons fire. The baby is swaddled, instantly. He's handed to a wet nurse, a peasant woman with healthy milk. The queen will not breastfeed. It is considered low class. The baby is taken away to his own nursery. He will barely know his parents. He belongs to France now, or England, or Spain. You leave the birthing chamber exhausted by the heat and the noise. You walk through the long gallery. It is night. You see a servant snuffing out candles. The palace is going to sleep. But there is one group of people who never sleep. The people who make this machine run. The invisible army. We have talked about the nobles, but they are the tip of the iceberg. For every duke wearing silk, there are 10 servants wearing wool, scrubbing the floors, emptying the pots and turning the spits. You decide to go where you aren't supposed to go. Downstairs. Below stairs. You open a discreet door hidden in the wood panelling. You descend a narrow stone staircase. The air changes. It gets hotter. It smells of onions, wet dogs and laundry lye. You enter the service wing. This is a city within a city. There are thousands of people here. You see the laundry maids. Their hands are red and raw from the lye soap. They are scrubbing the king's shirts. If they leave a spot, they're fined. If they tear the lace, they are fired. You see the wood bearers, men whose only job is to carry logs to the 300 fireplaces in the palace. They are human mules. They walk miles every day up and down the stairs carrying heavy timber. They are covered in bark dust and splinters. You see the turnspits in the kitchen. We talked about the dogs, but here it is often young boys. They sit by the fire turning the handle of the roasting spit for hours. Their faces are blistered from the heat. They are dehydrated. But there is a hierarchy here too. The king's valet is a powerful man. He controls who gets into the bedroom. Dukes bribe him. He wears the king's cast-off clothes. He has his own servants. The page boys are the sons of nobles, sent to learn obedience. They run messages. They hold trains. They are often bullied. And then, the lowest of the low, the scourers, the people who clean the drains, the people who scrape the grease off the floor. They live in the dark. They eat the scraps that the dogs reject. You realise that the palace is a vampire. It sucks the energy out of the poor to feed the vanity of the rich. But the servants have secrets. They see everything. They hear everything. They know which duchess is sleeping with the stable boy. They know which minister is stealing from the treasury. They know which medicine the doctor is actually giving the king. Information is currency, and the servants are rich in it. You walk past a group of maids giggling in a corner. They stop when they see you. They drop a curtsy, but their eyes are sharp. They know you're an outsider. You head back upstairs, back to the gold and the mirrors, but you can't look at the palace the same way. You know what is underneath the floorboards. You know what is behind the walls: filth, pain, and labour. You return to your attic room. The candle is guttering. You sit on your bed. You look at your hands. They are clean, soft. You're lucky. You're a noble. But tomorrow, you have a new challenge. The court is moving. The king gets bored, or the palace gets too dirty. When the cesspits overflow and the smell becomes unbearable, the king says, "We move." Imagine moving a city of 10,000 people. It is a royal progress. You have to pack everything: your bed, your clothes, your plates, your servants. You load them onto wagons, the roads are mud, it is raining. You join a caravan that stretches for miles. Carriages, carts, horses, soldiers. It is a migration. And where are you going? To another palace. One that has been empty for 6 months. One that is cold, damp, and full of cobwebs. You will arrive, you will unpack, you will fight for a room, and you will start the whole cycle over again. Waiting, standing, gambling, starving. But that is tomorrow. Tonight you have one more duty. The couchée. The king is going to bed. You have to go back to his bedroom. You have to watch him take off his pants. You have to watch him get into bed. Why? Because if you aren't there, he might forget you. And in the court, being forgotten is worse than death. So you stand up, you straighten your wig, you splash some lavender water on your face to wake up, and you walk back into the light. But as you walk, you notice something. A spot on your silk cuff. Is it wine? Is it gravy? No, it is blood. A flea bite you scratched too hard. It is a tiny red mark on a field of white silk. A reminder. Underneath the velvet, you're just meat. Just like the peasant. Just like the king. And the fleas don't care about your title. We are going to talk about the things that eat the rich. The parasites. The diseases. The gout. The pox. The ague. Because money can buy a lot of things. But in the 17th century, it cannot buy health. In fact, being rich might just kill you faster. You are standing in the gallery watching the king walk by. He looks majestic. He looks powerful. But if you look closer, if you look past the diamonds and the embroidery, you see the truth. The king is limping. His feet are swollen to twice their normal size. He wears special velvet slippers because he cannot fit into leather boots. Gout. It is the disease of kings, and it is a direct result of being rich. In the 17th century, the wealthy believe that vegetables are for peasants. Fruit is dangerous, water is poison. So they eat meat, rich, fatty, gamey meat, venison, boar, swan, peacock, and they drink wine by the gallon. This diet floods the body with uric acid. The acid crystallizes in the joints, usually in the big toe. The pain is excruciating. It feels like your bones are being crushed by hot glass. You see the Duke of Norfolk wince as he steps. He has it too. The bishop has it. Half the court is hobbling. They treat it with creativity. They apply poultices of raw meat. They drink potions made of crushed coral. They bleed themselves until they faint, but they never ever stop eating the meat. Because to eat a salad is to admit you are poor. And gout is just the beginning. Let's talk about the pox, syphilis. the Great Pox. It arrived in Europe in the late 1400s, likely from the Americas, though that is debated. By 1680, it is everywhere. It starts with a sore, then a rash, then it goes dormant. You think you are cured, but years later it comes back. It attacks the bones, it eats the nose, it destroys the brain. You look around the room, you see a count wearing a heavy metal nosepiece painted to look like skin. His nose collapsed years ago. You see a lady whose hands shake uncontrollably. You see a prince who has suddenly become paranoid and erratic. The pox. The treatment? Mercury. A night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Doctors put you in a sweating box. You sit in a wooden crate with your head sticking out. Underneath they burn mercury. The toxic fumes rise. You sweat. You salivate. Pints of saliva a day. Your teeth fall out. But the mercury kills the bacteria. Sometimes. More often, the mercury kills you. It is a slow, humiliating death. But at court you pretend it isn't happening. You cover the sores with black silk patches. You wear a wig to hide the hair loss. You blame your shaking hands on nerves. And then there is the malaria. We think of malaria as a tropical disease, but in the 17th century Europe is full of swamps. The mosquitoes are everywhere. The king shivers. He has a fever. Then he is cold. Then he sweats. It comes in cycles, every 3 days. Tertian fever. Doctors treat it with Jesuits' bark, cinchona bark from South America. It contains quinine. It actually works. It is one of the few real medicines they have, but they also use bloodletting. If the king has a fever, the doctors swarm. They open a vein. They take a bowl of blood. Look, they say, pointing to the congealed blood. It is dark. That is the bad humour leaving. It isn't bad humour. It is oxygen-depleted blood. They are draining his life force while he is fighting an infection. It is a miracle anyone survives the royal physician. But let's step away from the sick room. Let's go outside. The gardens, Versailles, Hampton Court. The gardens are masterpieces. Geometric hedges, infinite vistas, fountains that shoot water 50 feet into the air. You walk through the orangery. The smell of citrus blossoms is intoxicating. It masks the smell of the cesspit nearby. But the gardens are also a trap. You are walking with a group of courtiers. The king decides he wants a promenade. It is July. It is noon. It is 90 degrees. You're wearing wool and velvet. You're wearing a wig. The king walks fast. He loves the heat. He doesn't sweat, or at least no one is allowed to say he does. You have to keep up. You cannot take off your coat. You cannot loosen your cravat. You cannot sit down. People faint. They drop like flies. If you fall, you are dragged into the bushes by the Swiss guard so you don't spoil the king's view. And if it rains? The king decides to walk in the rain. You walk in the rain. Your silk ruins. Your wig droops like a wet dog. Your makeup runs down your face in streaks of red and white lead. You look like a melting clown. But you smile. Lovely weather, sire. The gardens are also a place of danger. Duels. Officially, duelling is illegal. The king banned it. He hates it when his nobles kill each other. It's a waste of good officers. But honour is everything. If someone insults you, your coat is last season, or your mistress is ugly, you have to challenge them. You meet at dawn behind the hedges. You use swords, rapiers. These aren't the heavy hacking swords of the Middle Ages. They are light, fast, and needle-sharp. You don't slash, you thrust. A single poke to the lung and you drown in your own blood. A poke to the stomach and you die of peritonitis 3 days later screaming. There are no antibiotics. A scratch can kill you. You fight. Metal rings on metal. The grass is slippery with dew. You lunge. You hit him. He falls. You have won. You have defended your honour, but now you have to run. If the king finds out, you will be arrested. You might lose your head. So you flee. You go into exile. You leave the court, the money, the power, all because someone made a joke about your shoes. But let's say you don't fight. You stay. You need to relax. You need a break. You go to the menagerie. The king collects animals, lions, tigers, elephants. They live in small cages. They are miserable. They pace back and forth. But to you, they are wonders. You have never seen a tiger. You think it is a monster from a myth. The king invites you to watch a fight. He puts a lion in a pit with a bull, or dogs. It is a callback to the Roman arena. The nobles cheer. The animals tear each other apart. It is bloody. It is cruel. It reflects the court. Everyone is trapped in a cage. Everyone is waiting to fight. You leave the menagerie, you feel sick, you go back to the palace. It is evening. The candles are lit. The gambling tables are open. You sit down to play basset. This is a card game. It is pure luck. The dealer, the banker, has a massive advantage. You're playing against the king's brother, or the king's mistress. You can't win. If you win too much, you are insulting them. If you lose, you are bankrupt. You lose 1,000 livres. You don't have 1,000 livres. You sign a note. I owe you. Now you're owned. You're owned by the person who holds your debt. They can ask you for favours. Vote for this law. Introduce me to this duke. Give me your daughter. Gambling isn't a game. It is the currency of corruption. You stand up. You're dizzy. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's the lead makeup. Maybe it's the panic. You need fresh air. You walk out onto the balcony. The night is cool. You look down at the courtyard. You see the nightmen. We talked about them in the city. But they are here too. The gong farmers. They are emptying the cesspits of the palace. They work in silence. They are covered in filth. They shovel the waste of the king, the queen, the dukes and the servants into carts. They are the only ones who know the truth. That underneath the silk everyone smells the same. You watch them roll the carts away into the dark. You realise that the palace is just a shiny machine that turns gold into, well, waste. You go back inside. You have to be at the couchée. The king is going to bed. You stand in the bedroom. The king takes off his wig. He is bald. He takes off his coat. He is old. He looks small without his heels. He gets into bed. The curtains are drawn. Good night, sire. You walk back to your attic. You take off your own wig. You wipe the lead off your face. You look in the mirror. You look tired. You look old. You're 35. In the 17th century, that is middle-aged. You lie down. You listen to the rats. You wonder if it's worth it. But then you remember the alternative. The muddy village. The pig farm. The silence of the country. No. You are here. You're at the centre of the world. Even if it smells. Even if it hurts. You're a courtier. And tomorrow you might get a smile. Just one smile. And that will make it all okay. Or so you tell yourself. But there is one person in the palace we haven't talked about. The person who has no choice. The queen. Not the king's wife. The other queen. The mistress. The maîtresse en titre. The official mistress. She's the most powerful woman in France. She has her own apartments. She has her own court. Ambassadors visit her before they visit the queen. But her job is terrifying. She has to be beautiful. Always. She cannot age. She cannot be sick. She cannot be sad. If she bores the king, she is out. If she gets pregnant, complicated. If she gets fat, disaster. She lives on a knife's edge. She drinks vinegar to stay thin. She bathes in milk to stay soft. She uses witchcraft, love powders, to keep the king interested. We are going to talk about the affair of the poisons. A scandal that rocked Versailles. Witches, black masses, poisoned shirts, and the king's mistress right in the middle of it. Because when you are fighting for the heart of the king, you don't use a sword, you use magic, and sometimes you use arsenic. You're walking through the dark corridors of Paris. It is the late 1670s. You have left the palace for a night because you need something you can't get at court. You're wearing a cloak to hide your face. You knock on a wooden door in a narrow alley. A woman opens it. She smells of incense and dried herbs. This is La Voisin, Catherine Monvoisin. She's a fortune teller, a midwife, a sorceress. But mostly she's a businesswoman. You sit down at her table. You tell her your problem. The king is losing interest. You whisper. Or perhaps, my husband is living too long. She nods. She understands. She opens a box. Inside are powders. Some are love powders, made of dried toads, bone dust and Spanish fly. You're supposed to slip them into the king's wine. They are meant to make him fall in love with you again, but other powders are simpler. Arsenic. Succession powder, she calls it. A polite name for poison. You buy a vial. You pay in gold. You leave. This isn't a fantasy story. This is the affair of the poisons. It was the biggest scandal in the history of the French court. It turned out that half the aristocracy was visiting witches. The king's mistress, Madame de Montespan, was accused. They said she participated in black masses, that she drank blood, that she bought poison to kill her rivals. The king was terrified. He realized that the people closest to him, the women he slept with, the men he dined with, were potentially murderers. He launched an investigation. The Chambre Ardente, the burning court. Hundreds were arrested. La Voisin was burned at the stake. But when the trail led too close to the king's mistress, he shut it down. He burned the evidence. He couldn't let the world know that the heart of his golden court was rotten. But you aren't involved in the poison. You just want to survive. And to survive, you need to understand the most complex, dangerous, and absurd system ever invented. Etiquette. In the modern world, etiquette means knowing which fork to use. In the royal court, etiquette is a minefield. One wrong step and your career explodes. Let's talk about the hat. You are walking in the garden. You see a duke. Do you take off your hat? Yes. But how? There are rules. If he is a royal duke, you take it off and bow low. If he is a regular duke, you take it off but don't bow as low. If he is an equal, you just touch the brim. If you take it off for a lesser noble, you look weak. If you keep it on for a greater noble, you are arrogant. You spend your whole day calculating hat angles. And then there is the chair. We mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Who sits? The king and queen have armchairs. The children of France, the royal children, have chairs with backs but no arms. The duchesses have tabourets, stools. Everyone else stands. If a princess enters the room, the duchesses have to stand up. Unless the princess says, keep your seat. But she might say it sarcastically. You have to read the tone. People fought duels over stools. Friendships ended because someone sat down too early. It was a weaponized game of musical chairs. And the door? Who walks through the door first? If two dukes meet at a doorway, they stop. They bow. After you. No, after you. They can stand there for 10 minutes. It is a politeness standoff. If you walk through first, you are claiming superiority. If you walk through second, you are submitting. Sometimes, to solve it, they open both doors and walk through side by side, squeezing. Their wide coats through the frame so neither has to be second. It is exhausting. It is ridiculous. But it keeps you busy. It keeps you from thinking about the fact that you are broke, tired, and smell like a wet dog. But let's leave the etiquette and go to the one place where you can relax. The hunt. This isn't the boring boar hunt we talked about earlier. This is the stag hunt, the sport of kings. It is a massive production. Hundreds of dogs, hundreds of horses. You ride out. The horn blows. The dogs pick up the scent. You gallop. You jump hedges. You splash through streams. Mud flies everywhere. It covers your velvet coat. You don't care. For a few hours, you're wild. You're chasing death. The stag is cornered. It turns to fight. Its antlers are sharp. It gores a dog. The dog screams. The king dismounts. He pulls out a sword. He walks up to the stag. He kills it. The kill. It is a ritual. The king cuts open the stag. The dogs are allowed to eat the entrails. The steaming guts are thrown onto the grass. The smell of hot blood fills the air. The king dips his hands in the blood. Sometimes he smears it on the face of a young courtier. A blooding. It is an initiation. You watch this primal scene. The man in the wig, covered in blood, laughing. This is the true face of the aristocracy. Underneath the powder and the lace, they are hunters. They are predators. You ride back to the palace. You are exhausted. You are sore, but you feel better. You have killed something. You have asserted your dominance over nature, but nature has a way of fighting back. We're going to talk about the winter of 1709, the Great Frost. It was the coldest winter in 500 years. The temperature dropped so low that the wine froze in the king's glass, the ink froze in the inkwell, the birds froze in the sky and fell like stones. The palace, with its big windows and stone walls, became an icebox. The fireplaces were useless. You could stand in front of the fire and burn your face while your back froze. People died in their beds. Servants froze to death in the attics. The king didn't cancel court. He sat on his throne, wrapped in furs, shivering. Outside, the peasants were dying by the thousands. The crops failed. The famine was horrific. People ate grass. They ate leather. But inside the palace, you ate bread. It was expensive, but you had it. But the guilt? No, you didn't feel guilt. You felt relief. Thank God I am inside. That is the seduction of the court. It protects you from the reality of the world, until it doesn't. Because eventually the money runs out. Let's talk about debt. You are a noble. You are rich. No, you are land rich. You have estates. You have peasants who pay you rent. But you need cash. To live at court, you need cash. For the clothes, for the gambling, for the bribes. You borrow. You borrow from merchants. You borrow from the king. You're drowning in debt. You can't pay your tailor. He waits in your antechamber for hours. You sneak out the back door. You can't pay your servants. They steal your silver spoons to survive. You're living a lie. You're wearing a coat worth 10,000 livres, but you can't afford a loaf of bread. This is the fragility of the system. It is a house of cards built on credit and pretension. And one day, the cards fall. The king dies. Louis XIV died in 1715. He had ruled for 72 years. Most people had never known another king. He died of gangrene in his leg. It started as a small black spot. It grew. It smelled. He lay in his great bed, rotting alive. The courtiers watched. They waited. When he took his last breath, the candle was snuffed out. The Lord Chamberlain walked onto the balcony. He broke his staff of office. The king is dead. Long live the king. And just like that, the power shifted. The crowd rushed to the new king, a 5-year-old boy, Louis XIV. They abandoned the old man's body. It is the final lesson of the court. Loyalty is for the living. The dead are just history. But we aren't done yet. We have seen the French court, but across the Channel there is another court, the Tudors, Henry VIII. If Louis XIV was about style, Henry VIII is about fear. We're going to go to Hampton Court, and we're going to see what happens when the king isn't just vain but dangerous. We're going to talk about the wives, not the romance, the reality. Imagine being married to a man who has absolute power and a very short temper. You're lying in bed next to him. He is snoring. He smells of an ulcerated leg. Henry had a wound that never healed. It smelled awful. You know that if you don't give him a son, or if you look at another man, or if you just annoy him, you lose your head. Living with Henry VIII is living with a serial killer who thinks he is God. We're going to walk the halls of Hampton Court. We're going to hear the screams of Catherine Howard running down the gallery begging for her life. Her ghost is said to still scream there. We're going to see the dark side of monarchy, where the palace isn't a cage, it is an executioner's block. So you survived Versailles. You survived the sun-drenched, perfume-soaked, polite misery of the French court. Now, let's cross the Channel. Let's go to England. Let's go to the court of Henry VIII. If Versailles was a theatre, Hampton Court is a slaughterhouse. You are a courtier here. The rules are different. In France, if you annoy the king, you are exiled. In England, if you annoy the king, your head ends up on a spike on London Bridge. The atmosphere is heavy. Paranoia hangs in the air like fog. Henry is a massive man, over 6 feet tall, broad, imposing. In his youth, he was the Golden Prince. Now, he's bloated, angry, and in constant pain. He has a wound on his leg, an ulcer that won't heal. It oozes pus. The smell follows him everywhere. You can tell where the king is in the palace by the scent of rotting flesh, and the lavender the servants throw on the floor to mask it. You are. Walking down the haunted gallery, it is called that for a reason, Catherine Howard, the 5th wife. She was young, foolish, she had a past. When Henry found out, she was arrested. Legend says she broke free from her guards. She ran down this gallery, screaming for the king, begging for mercy. She reached the door to the chapel where Henry was at mass. She pounded on the wood. Henry ignored her. He kept praying. The guards dragged her away, screaming. A few days later, she was beheaded. You walk down that same hallway. It is silent now, but you feel the chill. You know that in this court, youth and beauty are not protections. They are targets. But let's talk about the daily life. The food. Henry loves to eat. The Tudor diet is meat. Just meat. Roast beef, mutton, pork, venison, swan, peacock. Vegetables are considered windy food. They cause gas, so the king avoids them. You sit at the table. You eat the meat. It is heavy. It sits in your stomach like a stone. And the sugar. Henry loves sugar. He puts it on everything. He eats subtleties, sculptures made of marzipan and spun sugar. His teeth are black. They're rotting in his head. When he speaks, you can see the decay. But you don't look away. You smile. You tell him he has a beautiful smile. Because if you don't, treason. But the real danger isn't the food. It's the religion. Henry breaks with Rome. He creates the Church of England. Suddenly the rules change. If you are a Catholic, you are a traitor. If you are a Protestant who is too Protestant, you are a heretic. You have to walk a spiritual tightrope. You have to believe exactly what the king believes today, and tomorrow he might change his mind. You see Thomas More, the king's friend, the wisest man in England. He refuses to sign the Act of Supremacy. He refuses to say Henry is the head of the church. Henry executes him. If he kills his best friend, what will he do to you? You learn to keep your mouth shut. You learn to nod. You learn to have no opinions, but you have ambition. You want to rise. How? You give him your daughter. This is the Boleyn strategy. Thomas Boleyn pushed his daughters, Mary and Anne, toward the king. Mary was the mistress. She was discarded. Anne was different. She played the game. She held out for marriage. She changed the history of the world. And her reward? A swordsman from Calais. You look at your own daughter. She's pretty. She's 15. Do you send her to court? Do you risk it? If she succeeds, you are a duke. If she fails, she is dead. It is a gamble with a human life, and plenty of fathers took it. But let's leave the politics. Let's look at the hygiene. Hampton Court has a great house of easement, a massive communal toilet. It seats 28 people. It sits over a brick-lined drain that empties into the moat. The gong scourers have to clean it. They climb into the drain. They are waist-deep in the waste of the court. They are paid well, but they die young. The king has his own toilet, the close stool, a velvet-covered box. The groom of the stool is the man who wipes the king. It sounds like a terrible job, but it is the most coveted position in England. Why? Because when the king is on the toilet, he is vulnerable. He is relaxed. He talks. The groom of the stool hears the secrets. He can ask for favours. Sire, my cousin needs a job. It is the intimacy of the bowel. Power flows through the strangest places, but the smell. Even with the gong scourers, the palace stinks. Henry has a nose for it. He hates bad smells. He orders the servants to mark the doors with red crosses where people have urinated to shame them. It doesn't work. People just pee on the crosses. So he moves. The court goes on progress. Just like in France, they pack up and leave. They let the palace sweeten, air out for a few months. You are on the road again, riding through the English rain. You stop at a monastery, or what's left of it. Henry has dissolved the monasteries. He has stolen their land, their gold, their lead roofs. You see the ruins of a great abbey. The windows are smashed, the monks are gone. They are beggars now. It is a cultural revolution. It is the destruction of 1,000 years of history. And you are part of it. You bought some of the land. You built a house with stone stolen from the church. You feel a twinge of guilt. Are you cursed? But then you look at your new estate. It is rich. It is profitable. You decide you can live with the curse. But can you live with the ghosts? The Tudors are haunted, not by spirits, but by the past. Henry dies. His son, Edward, dies young. His daughter, Mary, takes over. Bloody Mary. She burns Protestants, hundreds of them. You smell the smoke in Smithfield. You watch men and women being burned alive because they read the Bible in English. You have to change your religion again. I am Catholic now, you shout. Then Mary dies. Elizabeth takes over. I am Protestant again. You are a weather vane. You spin whichever way the wind blows. It is the only way to keep your head. Elizabeth is different. She is smart. She's cautious. She paints her face white with lead, just like the French. She wears wigs. She wears dresses so wide she has to turn sideways to walk through a door. She never marries. The Virgin Queen. Why? Because she saw what marriage did to her mother, Anne Boleyn, and her stepmothers. Marriage is death. She rules alone. She plays the foreign princes against each other. Maybe I will marry you. Maybe not. She keeps them dangling for 40 years. It is a masterclass in diplomacy. But her court is a pressure cooker too. She is vain. If you are a woman, you cannot be prettier than the Queen. If you are a man, you must pretend to be in love with her even when she is old and toothless. You write her poems. You are the sun, the moon, the stars. She knows it is a lie, but she likes it. And if you make her angry, she doesn't execute you, usually. She hits you. She throws a slipper at you. She boxes your ears. She is a Tudor. She has a temper. But under her rule, England changes. The ships sail. Drake. Raleigh. They go to the New World. They bring back tobacco. Potatoes. You try smoking. It makes you cough. It makes you dizzy. This will never catch on, you think. You are wrong. You go to the theatre. A new writer. Shakespeare. He writes plays about kings who kill their wives, about ambition, about madness. You watch Macbeth. You see the king being murdered. It hits too close to home. The theatre is the new church. It is where people go to understand their lives. But the theatre is dangerous too. The plague closes it down constantly. When the bill of mortality goes up, when the death count rises, the doors are locked. You sit in your house. You hear the bell tolling. You realise that for all the glory of the Elizabethan age, it is still fragile. A microbe can destroy it. But let's step back. Let's look at the bigger picture. We have seen the French court, the English court. But there is another world. A world of silence. The Ottoman harem, Topkapi Palace, Istanbul. This is a different kind of cage. You are a sultan. You live in the house of felicity. You have hundreds of women, concubines. But you are a prisoner too. You cannot leave the palace. You're watched by the janissaries, your own slave soldiers. If they are unhappy, they bang their spoons on their soup cauldrons. It is the sound of a coup. If you hear the spoons, run. And your brothers? The law of fratricide. When a new sultan takes the throne, he executes all his brothers to prevent civil war. The mutes come in the night. Men who have had their tongues cut out so they cannot tell secrets. They carry a silk bowstring. They strangle the princes, even the babies. The coffins are carried out of the palace the next morning. A line of small coffins. It is the price of stability. One king. No rivals. You realise that power is a curse, whether you are Louis XIV, Henry VIII, or Suleiman the Magnificent. You are alone. You're terrified. You're trapped in a golden room waiting for the assassin or the doctor or the executioner. But let's leave the palaces. Let's go to the edge of the world, to the people who walked away from it all. The hermits. We talked about them briefly. But let's look closer. Why would someone choose to live in a cave? Or on top of a pillar? St. Simeon Stylites. He lived on top of a 50-foot pillar for 37 years. He never came down. People sent food up in a bucket. He was a celebrity. Pilgrims came to watch him sit. Why? Because he was free. He didn't have to bow to a king. He didn't have to pay taxes. He didn't have to worry about fashion or poison or plague. He was above it all. Literally. It is an extreme reaction, but you understand it. After walking through the sewage of Versailles and the blood of the Tower of London, a pillar in the desert looks pretty good. But you can't be a hermit. You have to live in the world. So, how do you survive? You cultivate sprezzatura. This is an Italian word from the Renaissance. Baldassare Castiglione wrote about it in The Book of the Courtier. It means studied carelessness. The art of making difficult things look easy. You're terrified. Act bored. You're bankrupt. Act generous. You're dying of syphilis. Wear a mask and dance. It is the armour of the courtier. You hide your humanity behind a performance, and we still do it today. Look at social media. It is the new Versailles. We curate our lives. We filter our faces. We show the world the golden gates, but we hide the cesspit. We're all courtiers now. But let's strip away the filter. Let's look at the body again. The teeth. Sugar ruined the teeth of the rich. But the poor? They ate pottage and bread. Their teeth were worn down by grit, but they didn't rot as fast. Archaeologists find skeletons of peasants with better teeth than kings. It is a strange irony. The poor couldn't afford the poison, and the lead makeup. Only the rich could afford it. The gout. Only the rich could afford the meat. Being poor was hard. It was cold. It was hungry. But in some ways it was healthier. You didn't poison yourself for fashion. You didn't eat yourself to death. You just worked and died. But let's go back to the bedroom. One last time. The bedding ceremony. A royal wedding. The couple is put to bed. The bishop blesses the bed. He sprinkles holy water on the sheets. The king and queen get in, and then the court watches. They watch them kiss. They watch them touch. They have to witness the consummation, or at least the beginning of it, because a marriage isn't legal until it is consummated. Imagine the pressure. You are 18. You have never met this woman, and the Archbishop of Canterbury is staring at you. It is the ultimate invasion of privacy. It turns sex into a legal procedure, and if it doesn't work, impotence trials. If a woman wants an annulment, she can claim her husband is impotent. The court appoints wise women to inspect him. They check his equipment. Sometimes they make him try to perform in front of a jury. It is humiliating. It is grotesque. It proves that in the past your body did not belong to you. It belonged to the church, the state, and the law. You shudder. You're glad you're not a king. But the night is ending. The candles are burning low. The king is asleep. The guards are changing. You can finally close your eyes, but as you drift off you hear a sound, a scratch, a rat. It is gnawing on the leg of your bed. You pull your feet up. You wrap the blanket tight. You remember the groom of the stool. You remember the lead makeup. You remember the beheaded queens. And you realise that the palace isn't a fairy tale. It is a horror story wrapped in silk. But it is a story that we keep telling. Why? Why are we obsessed with royalty? Why do we watch The Crown? Why do we care about Prince Harry? Because we love the spectacle. We love the gold, but we also love the tragedy. We want to believe that being rich makes you happy, but deep down, we know it doesn't, and that makes us feel better about our own lives. I may have a mortgage, you think, but at least I don't have to watch the king poop, and that, my friend, is the true value of history, perspective. But we have one more stop. We have seen the kings. Now we have to see the end of kings, the revolution, the guillotine. When the people finally said, enough. When the smell of the cesspit became too much. When the price of bread got too high. The gates of Versailles were stormed. The mirrors were smashed. The king and queen, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, were dragged to Paris. They were put in a dungeon, the Temple prison. They lost their wigs. They lost their silk. They were just a man and a woman, frightened, holding their children. They were marched to the scaffold. The blade fell, and the age of the palace ended. It was bloody, it was chaotic, but it was inevitable. Because you can't build a civilization on a sewer and expect it to last forever. So, as you lie in your modern bed, think about the silence. The silence of a room that is yours. The silence of a life that belongs to no one but you. You are the king of your own castle, and your castle has plumbing. Be grateful. Sleep well. We have walked the halls of Versailles, smelling the perfume and the waste. We have ducked under the axe in the court of Henry VIII. But if you think those courts were stiff, uncomfortable or dangerous, you haven't seen anything yet. We are going to travel south, across the Pyrenees, to Madrid, to the court of the Spanish Habsburgs. If Versailles is a party, the Spanish court is a funeral that never ends. You enter the Alcazar of Madrid. It is dark. The windows are small to keep out the blistering Spanish sun. The walls are thick. It is silent. In France, the courtiers wear bright colours, red heels, gold lace, blue velvet. In Spain, the fashion is black. Severe, heavy, expensive black velvet. You are a courtier here. You wear a golilla, a stiff cardboard collar covered in grey fabric. It holds your head up at an unnatural angle. You cannot look down. You cannot turn your head. You have to turn your entire body. It is designed to make you look arrogant. It actually just makes your neck cramp. The etiquette here is not a game. It is a religion. The King of Spain is not just a monarch. He is the Catholic king. He is half priest, half statue. He does not walk. He glides. He does not smile. He stares. He eats alone. You watch him. He sits at a table under a canopy. He is served by high-ranking nobles on their knees. The food is brought in by a procession of guards. But look at the king's face. He has the Habsburg jaw. This is the price of keeping power in the family. The Habsburgs married their cousins, and their nieces, and their uncles, for generations. The result is genetic disaster. The lower jaw grows too fast. It juts out. The bottom teeth stick out past the top teeth. The king cannot close his mouth. He drools. He cannot chew. You watch as he tries to eat. He has to tilt his head back and swallow chunks of meat whole because he cannot grind them. It is painful to watch. His digestion is ruined. He is constantly sick. But you cannot look away. You cannot show pity. You have to pretend he is the most perfect specimen of humanity on earth. This genetic bottleneck leads to Charles II, El Hechizado, the bewitched. He is the end of the line. He didn't speak until he was 4. He didn't walk until he was 8. His jaw was so deformed he couldn't speak clearly. He was bald, senile, and sterile by the age of 30. The court treated him like a holy relic. They surrounded him with doctors, priests, and exorcists. They believed he was bewitched by sorcery. In reality, he was bewitched by his own family tree, which looked less like a tree and more like a wreath. But the horror of the Spanish court isn't just genetic, it is bureaucratic. The etiquette of the palace. It is a set of rules so rigid that it kills people. There is a famous story, perhaps a legend, but based on the terrifying reality of the rules, about King Philip III. He was sitting by the fire. The fire got too hot. It was burning his legs. But the servant whose specific job it was to move the king's chair wasn't in the room. The other nobles were there, but they weren't allowed to touch the king's chair. It wasn't their rank. So the king sat there. He didn't move because a king does not move furniture. He got heat stroke. His legs were burned. He developed a fever and died. He was killed by manners. And the queen, her life is a prison. There is a rule. The Queen of Spain has no legs. This doesn't mean she is an amputee. It means no one is allowed to acknowledge that she has legs. If someone offers her a gift of silk stockings, the major domo throws them away, shouting, "The Queen of Spain has no legs!" If she falls off a horse? This happened to the wife of Charles II. Her foot got caught in the stirrup. She was being dragged. Two nobles saw it. They knew that if they touched the Queen's foot to free her, they would be executed for touching the royal person. But if they didn't, she would die. They saved her. They grabbed her foot and pulled it loose. And then they ran. They sprinted to the stables, grabbed horses and rode for the border. They knew that saving the Queen's life was a capital crime. They were eventually pardoned, but the fear was real. The Spanish court is a place of shadows, silence and slow genetic decay. But let's leave the stifling heat of Madrid. Let's go somewhere cold, somewhere wild. We're going to Russia, to the court of Peter the Great. If Spain is a funeral, Russia is a frat party held in a bear pit. Peter is a giant. Literally, he is 6'8". In a time when the average man is 5'5", he is a monster. He is strong enough to bend horseshoes with his bare hands, and he wants to drag Russia into the modern world, kicking and screaming. You're a boyar, a Russian noble. You have a long beard. You wear long robes with sleeves that touch the floor. You are traditional. You hate the West. Peter hates you. He returns from Europe with a pair of scissors. He holds a banquet. You are eating your soup. Peter walks up to you. He grabs your beard. Snip. He cuts it off. To a Russian Orthodox noble, the beard is the image of God. Cutting it off is a sin. Peter doesn't care. He says, "You look like savages." He passes a beard tax. If you want to keep your beard, you have to carry a special coin that says, "The beard is a useless burden." He forces you to wear Western clothes, tight breeches, wigs, coats. You freeze in the Russian winter. You feel naked. But the fashion police are the least of your worries. Peter loves to drink. He forms the all-joking, all-drunken synod of fools and jesters. It is a mockery of the church and the court. You are invited to his parties. You cannot say no. The doors are locked. Guards stand outside. Large buckets of vodka are brought in. You have to drink. If you refuse, Peter pours it down your throat. People pass out. People die of alcohol poisoning. Peter laughs. He is immune to hangovers. He sketches ships while you are vomiting under the table. And he loves dentistry. He carries a bag of dental tools. If you complain of a toothache, or if he just thinks your teeth look bad, he pulls them out. He keeps a sack of teeth as a souvenir. You learn to keep your mouth shut around the Tsar, but his greatest project is the city, St. Petersburg. He builds it on a swamp, in the middle of nowhere, in the freezing north. He orders you to move there. Build a stone house, he commands. There is no stone. You have to import every rock. The city is built by conscript labour. Thousands of serfs dig the mud with their bare hands. They die of malaria, dysentery and cold. Their bodies are thrown into the foundations. They call it the city built on bones. You live there. The damp rises up the walls. The Neva River floods every year, filling your parlour with icy water. Wolves roam the streets in winter, but you stay. Because if you leave, Peter will take your head. He kills his own son, Alexei. He tortures him to death because Alexei didn't want to be Tsar. Peter weeps at the funeral. Then he goes back to building ships. He is a force of nature. He makes Russia a superpower. But living in his shadow is like living under a falling mountain. But let's step back from the extremes. Spain and Russia are the outliers. What about the normal life of a royal child? We talked about the babies. But what happens when they grow up? You are a prince. You are 6 years old. You have everything. Ponies, toys made of gold, servants who bow, but you have no friends. The other children are menins, noble kids brought to play with you, but they are not your friends. They are your subjects. If you hit them, they have to smile. If they hit you, they are whipped. Except, you still need to be educated, and if you are lazy, if you refuse to learn your Latin, the tutor cannot hit you. You are the anointed one. Your body is sacred. So they bring in the whipping boy. This is your best friend, the only kid you actually like. When you fail your test, the tutor grabs the whipping boy. He beats him, right in front of you. The logic is, you will feel guilty, and you do. You cry. You promise to study. It is psychological torture. It teaches you that your actions cause pain to others, but you are physically immune. It creates a strange disconnect. Empathy mixed with entitlement. And as you grow up, you realize that everyone around you is using you. Your governess wants a pension. Your tutor wants a bishopric. Your friends want land. You're not a person. You are a lottery ticket. You learn to trust no one. You develop the royal stare. A look that sees everyone and no one. It is a defense mechanism. If you don't let them in, they can't hurt you. And then the marriage market begins. You are 12. Your father calls you in. You are marrying the Princess of Spain. You have never met her. She's your cousin. Probably. She doesn't speak your language. You're sent away. You're exchanged at the border like a hostage. You stand on a barge in the middle of a river, the Isle of Pheasants between France and Spain. You walk from one side to the other. You leave your family, your clothes, your servants, your name. You are stripped naked and dressed in the clothes of your new country. You are rebooted. You arrive at the new court. You are alone. The eyes of the nation are on you. Is she pretty? Is she fertile? You're 13. You're terrified. And then, the wedding night. We mentioned the bedding ceremony, but imagine the aftermath. You're expected to produce an heir immediately. If you don't, the ambassadors write letters. The prince is cold. The princess is barren. Your puberty is a matter of international diplomacy. If you succeed, you're safe for a while. If you fail, you're set aside or annulled. Look at Catherine of Aragon. She married Henry VIII's brother Arthur. Arthur died. She was stuck in England for years, poor, ignored, waiting to see if Henry would marry her. She was a pawn left on the board after the game was over. But let's talk about the specific horror of being a royal mistress. We touched on it with the poisons, but the daily life is a grind. You are the maîtresse en titre. You have to be fun. The king is bored. He is depressed. He is surrounded by sycophants. He comes to you to be entertained. You have to listen to his problems. The Spanish ambassador is annoying. My gout hurts. The queen is praying too much. You have to laugh, you have to sing, you have to be the fantasy. But you have rivals. The younger women, the maids of honour, they are watching you. They are counting your wrinkles. If you get sick, you hide it. If you're sad, you hide it. Madame de Maintenon, the last mistress and secret wife of Louis XIV, wrote, "If you knew what it was like to have to amuse a man who is no longer amusable. She was the most powerful woman in Europe, and she was exhausted. She spent her days knitting in a corner while the king worked, just so he could look at her. She was a piece of comforting furniture. And when the king dies, you're evicted. You lose your apartments. You lose your pension. You are sent to a convent, because a mistress has no status without the king. She is a shadow. You walk out of the palace gates. The carriage takes you away. You look back at the golden windows. You survived. But you have nothing to show for it except a few diamonds and a reputation that will be shredded by history books. But there is one final group we haven't met. The people who clean up the mess. The embalmers. The king is dead. Long live the king. But the old king is still in the bed, and he is starting to smell. The royal autopsy. It is a public event. The doctors cut him open. They remove the heart. They remove the entrails. They put the heart in a silver box, they put the entrails in a jar, they stuff the body with spices, but sometimes they do a bad job. William the Conqueror, 1087. He was a fat man. He died of a ruptured intestine. The funeral was delayed. It was hot. When they tried to stuff him into the stone coffin, he didn't fit. The monks pushed on his stomach. The body exploded. The smell was so bad that the mourners ran out of the church. The funeral was finished in a rush. It is the final indignity. The man who conquered England bursting like a rotten balloon. Or Queen Elizabeth II, she refused to be embalmed. She was terrified of it. She lay in her coffin for days while the court argued about succession. The gases built up. Her body exploded inside the coffin. A loud crack was heard in the night. Even in death, the royal body is a problem. So you stand there watching the funeral procession. The black velvet, the incense. You realise that for all the gold, for all the power, the end is the same. Rot. But life goes on. The new king is on the throne. The gambling tables are open. The music is playing. You straighten your wig. You put a patch over your sore. You walk back into the ballroom. Because the show must go on, and you have a role to play. But as you dance, you notice a servant in the corner. He is holding a tray of wine. He is looking at you. There is something in his eyes. Not fear, not respect, anger. The invisible army is watching, and they are getting tired of carrying the wood. We're inching closer to the edge, to the moment when the servant drops the tray and picks up a rock. But before the revolution, there is one last gasp of excess. The Rococo, Marie Antoinette, the Petit Trianon, playing shepherdess while the people starve. We're going to go to the precipice, and we're going to see what happens when a civilization forgets that it is mortal. You're standing in the most beautiful room in the world, the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. It is 1785. The sun is streaming through the 17 arched windows, reflecting off the 17 matching mirrors. Crystal chandeliers hang like frozen waterfalls. The ceiling is painted with the triumphs of Louis XIV. You're wearing silk so fine it feels like water. Your wig is powdered with flour that could have fed a family for a week. You're laughing. Everyone is laughing. But if you stop laughing for a second, and if you listen closely past the music of the harpsichord and the rustle of taffeta, you can hear a rumble. It isn't thunder, it is Paris. Paris is hungry. The harvest failed again. The price of bread has doubled. People are spending 90% of their income on food. But here, in the Gilded Cage, bread is plentiful. Brioche, croissants, cakes. Marie Antoinette is playing cards. She is losing. She loses 100,000 livres in a night. She laughs. It is only money. She builds a fake village in the gardens, the Hameau de la Reine, a rustic farm with a mill, a dairy and a barn. She dresses up as a shepherdess. She milks cows that are washed and perfumed before she touches them. She serves milk in porcelain bowls painted with flowers. It is a fantasy, a game. Let's pretend to be poor, but the real poor are watching, and they aren't amused. Pamphlets are circulating in Paris. The Austrian woman, Madame Deficit. They say she bathes in milk while the children have none. They say she has orgies. They say she's sending gold to her brother, the Emperor of Austria. Most of it is lies. Marie Antoinette isn't evil, she is clueless. She's a girl who was married at 14 and locked in a golden box. She doesn't know the price of bread. She has never bought a loaf in her life. But ignorance is no excuse when the stomach is empty. The tension builds. The king, Louis XVI, tries to fix it. He is a good man, but weak. He likes making locks. He spends hours in his workshop filing keys while the kingdom falls apart. He calls the Estates General, a meeting of the three classes, the clergy, the nobility and the people. He thinks they will vote to raise taxes on the rich. They don't. The nobles refuse to pay. The clergy refuse to pay. So the burden falls, as always, on the people. But this time the people say no. June 20th, 1789. The tennis court oath. The representatives of the people are locked out of the meeting hall, so they go to the royal tennis court. They swear an oath. We will not separate until we have written a constitution. It is the beginning of the end. But you are still dancing. You think it will blow over. It's just a riot, you say. The king will send the army. But the army's hungry too. The soldiers are peasants. They have mothers who are starving. July 14th, 1789. You're eating lunch. A servant runs in. He is pale. They have taken the Bastille. The Bastille? That old prison? Why? Gunpowder. The mob wasn't looking for prisoners. They were looking for powder for their muskets, and they cut off the governor's head. They put it on a pike. They are parading it through the streets. The king writes one word in his diary that day. Rien. Nothing. He meant he didn't hunt that day, but history sees it differently. October. The women of Paris are marching, the fishwives, strong women who gut fish with knives. They are marching to Versailles. Bread, they scream. Bread. They break into the palace. They kill the guards. They storm the Queen's bedroom. Marie Antoinette escapes through a secret door just seconds before they stab her bed. The King and Queen are dragged to the balcony. The crowd roars, "To Paris!" You watch as the royal family is put into a carriage. They are driven away, surrounded by the mob. The heads of their guards are bobbing on pikes next to the window. The palace is empty. The mirrors reflect nothing. The candles burn down. The rats come out. You realise with a jolt of terror that the party is over. You pack your bags. You take your diamonds. You sew them into the hem of your coat. You run. You become an émigré, a refugee. You flee to England, to Germany, to anywhere that will take you. You leave behind your estate, your titles, your world. Back in France, the guillotine is built. Dr. Guillotin didn't invent it to be cruel. He invented it to be humane. A cool breath on the back of the neck, he called it. It was democratic. In the old days, nobles were beheaded, quick, and commoners were hanged, slow. Now, everyone gets the same death. Equality in the grave. The terror begins. Robespierre, the Committee of Public Safety. If you aren't radical enough, you die. If you're too radical, you die. The king dies. The queen dies. The executioner holds up the head of Marie Antoinette. The crowd cheers, but then they stop cheering, because the hunger didn't go away. The bread is still expensive. The blood didn't fix the harvest. You're sitting in a rented room in London. You're teaching French to the children of a merchant. You used to own a province. Now you own a grammar book. You look at your hands. They are calloused. You have learned to cook. You have learned to mend your own clothes. You are alive, and you realise something. The revolution wasn't just about bread. It was about dignity. It was about the idea that a human being is not a piece of furniture to be moved by a king. But the cost? The cost was a generation drowned in blood. Eventually the fever breaks. Robespierre is executed. Napoleon rises, an emperor again. The cycle restarts. The gold returns. The court returns. But it is different. The divine right is gone. The king is just a man with a job. And if he does a bad job, he gets fired. But let's step away from the guillotine. Let's look at the quiet revolution. The one that happened in the bedroom. Hygiene. We talked about the smell. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, something changes. People start washing. Why? Because of cotton. Before, clothes were wool and linen, hard to wash. Now, cotton from the colonies, grown by slaves, a dark irony, is cheap. Cotton can be boiled. It can be white. People start wearing cotton underwear. They change it every day. The smell of the city changes. It stops smelling of old sweat and starts smelling of soap and water. Piped water. London builds a sewer system. The great stink of 1858, when the Thames smelled so bad that Parliament had to close the curtains, forces them to act. Joseph Bazalgette builds the sewers, miles of brick tunnels, cholera drops, typhoid drops. You can drink the water. This saves more lives than any king ever did. And medicine, germ theory, Louis Pasteur, Robert Koch, Joseph Lister. They realise it isn't bad air, it isn't demons, it is tiny invisible bugs. Doctors start washing their hands. Imagine that. For thousands of years, doctors were killing their patients with dirty hands. Now they wash them. Surgery stops being a death sentence. The world is getting cleaner. It is getting safer. But is it getting happier? You look at the Industrial Revolution. The factories, the smoke, the children working in the mines. We traded the mud of the field for the soot of the city. We traded the tyranny of the king for the tyranny of the clock. We are back to the beginning. The noise, the crowd, the rush. But there is a difference. You have a voice. You can vote. You can strike. You can read. You're not a serf. You're a citizen. And that is the journey. From the mud hut to the skyscraper. From the chamber pot to the flush toilet. From the subject to the individual. It was a long, bloody, smelly road. But we walked it. And now we are here. We have arrived at the modern world. But before we close the book, we have one last thing to do. We have to look at the ghosts. The people who didn't make it. The ones who fell in the mud. The ones who died in the oubliette. The ones who froze in the winter of 1709. We owe them a debt. Because they built the foundation we stand on. So, tonight, when you turn off the light, don't be afraid of the dark. The dark is just history waiting to be remembered. Listen to the silence. It isn't empty. It is full of voices. We lived, they say. We suffered. We hoped. And now it is your turn. What will you do with your turn? You have the heat. You have the light. You have the time. Will you build a wall? Or will you build a bridge? Will you be the king who hoards the grain? Or the baker who shares the bread? The choice is yours. But remember the lesson of the palace. The gold peels. The stone cracks. The king dies. Only the kindness survives. Only the shared humanity lasts. So, be kind to your neighbour, to the stranger, to yourself. Because in the end, we're all just travellers on the same road, trying to find a warm place to sleep. And on that note, take a deep breath. Smell the clean air of your room. Feel the softness of your sheets. Let the tension go. You're safe. You are home. Good night.